Hi, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. I've had a couple of people ask me in the last few days, one of them being my wife, if I really thought that our country could collapse. And the answer is yes and no. And that's not meant to be a trick, but I'll explain it in a minute. First, I want to give a big compliment to another channel. Zombie Farmer came out with a video yesterday, I believe, that put a lot of stuff on the table about beliefs. And for anybody, this is a guy, and I don't know him. I think we've left comments on each other's channels a couple of times. I like his stuff. He's a straight shooter. He's going to tell you exactly how he feels about things, and I like the way he does things a lot. And he doesn't pull any punches, and which I like. But he talks about the things that are important of how our country was built, what a lot of us stand for, and also the lack of which is responsible for what I maintain is the ongoing collapse of the country as we know it. And so I'm gonna have my guy put a link to his, and here again, I'm not doing him any help. I'm just giving my sincere compliment to you, Zombie. He's got a lot more subscribers than I do, so I'm not helping him a bit. But if you watch me and you haven't happened to watch him, give him a shot. So I have my guy leave a link to his channel down here below. Now, back to can our, and people say nation, collapse? Well, first off, we need to define a couple of terms, and one being nation, another being country, and then I'll throw in a third one because it has to do with something that I've mentioned before, and that is a consideration, that is empire. And I've mentioned John Glubb's Fate of Empires, his paper on that, in a previous video, because one of my viewers had asked me if I'd read it, and I said that I had, and he asked me what I thought of it, and I give a short explanation there, but it comes into, and as part of the explanation of what I'm going to say. Oh, and I should back up and say one more thing about Zombie. The thing that he, even though my books are not about really a collapse of society in and of itself, although I have another series of books that I've started to deal with that, the reason that I believe there would be such a catastrophic die-off during a grid down, an EMP-CME situation, is because of the things that Zombie talked about, and the collapse of societal standards. So now back to a couple of the definitions before we get into this. First off, we are not a nation, in my opinion, and never have been. I know we say these, we have a national anthem, we have we talk about ourselves as being one nation under God. There's a lot of national references that I think a lot of Americans, or should I say citizens of the United States, just crank off easily without thinking about it. We are a country, and I maintain that we have become an empire. Now I'll explain a little bit about that. A country is simply a group of people, or an area that's governed by a government. That's all a country is, and usually it's in a contiguous geographical area. It doesn't have to be, it can be spread out, but it's under a government. Whether that government is representative or not doesn't make any difference. That's a country. Very often it's made up of a myriad of people of different nationalities, of different ethnic origins, of different religions, or whatever. Okay. A nation is different. A nation is a group of people held together by common heritage, history, language, religion usually, and very often race, although that doesn't necessarily have to be. That's a nation. When I tell people that I don't think the United States has ever been a nation, they're shocked. Well, let me explain. Think about how our country, the United States, was founded. It wasn't one homogeneous group of people that came over and started everything and built what we see today. We had Dutch, we had English, we had French, we had Spanish coming in at different parts of the country at different times, vying for control, fighting each other sometimes, trading with each other sometimes. They had different backgrounds, they had different languages, they had different beliefs in many cases. They had certainly different heritage and history of the different groups. And some people could say, well, but they were all Europeans, you know, and lumping all Europeans together is like lumping all Indians together, or all Latin groups together. You know, it is the idea that there was unity in European heritage is just not true. I mean, the Europeans were slaughtering each other for eons before they ever came over to the New World. So they came over here, and they fought and they haggled, and of course they dealt with the Native Americans here, the Indians. Sometimes there was cooperation, and many times there was a lot of killing. And so they kind of cobbled together this under finally when it became British, part of the British Empire. They cobbled together these 13 colonies, and pretty soon things weren't going well between the colonies and the mother country, and so the colonies said, well, we're out of here. We don't share, we're not being treated right, we're not going to stay under you. And of course we know what happened there, the Revolutionary War. Well, it wasn't a unified effort amongst all Europeans that lived here in the Americas. Figures show us that 30% were loyal to Britain, approximately. 30% wanted separation, they wanted revolution, and of those only 3% actually fought. And like always happens, the 30% in the middle, they didn't care, they didn't know enough, they didn't pay attention, you know, whatever. They were going to go along with whatever happened. And that's what political parties still fight over, the uninformed and the unaffiliated. So we finally we got these we got our independence, and then we had 13 colonies vying to be essentially 13 sovereign states. They were operating under the Articles of Confederation, which was a very loose construct, and it gave of course each one of the states was essentially a sovereign entity of its own, and most of them wanted to stay that way. Well, the Articles of Confederation were too loose to really bring together a strong country, so they wanted to tweak, and what they first thought they were going to tweak the Articles became a writing of the Constitution. The Constitution was kind of a mess, and it wasn't something that was agreed on by everybody 100%. It's a conglomeration of compromises, and from people who had very different interests. The northern states had very different interests than the southern states, even back then. And they weren't about slavery necessarily. It was about commerce. It was about the fact that the North was more industrial, and after the Revolution became even more so. The South was more agrarian, and pretty much the way that Thomas Jefferson envisioned the new country of the United States to be. So this country came together. Well, it wasn't all smooth sailing. If you want to know, within the first about 5 years of our country being in existence, the government used its troops twice against American citizens who were again standing up against what they felt to be unreasonable and unfair tax policies. The same exact thing that that we had had a revolution about. Our own government, the United States government, was levying taxes against its citizens to pay for the Revolutionary War. If you want to look into that, look up Shays' Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, during which George Washington himself led federal troops against American citizens in western Pennsylvania. So we go along, and we have kind of a fits and starts of expansion in the country called the United States of America, until all of a sudden the Congress, dominated much by northern interests. The northern interests, dominated by industry, were passing tariffs and laws that were harmful to the southern agrarian interests. So the result of that was the secession of the southern states. Here again, does that sound like a united nation? No, it's not. They seceded. They didn't declare war on the North, but they simply seceded, much like we had during the Revolution, and said, you're being unfair with us, and we're not going to attack you, but we're just separating, which is our right. We're separating from the Union, and we're going to create our own union. Well, Abraham Lincoln didn't think that was right, and he put out an order for 75,000 troops to be mustered out of the state militias and sent to him to invade the South. And if you wanted to read probably the saddest chapter of American history, don't remember the drivel that you were taught in high school, the 2 pages that were taught by a history teacher who themselves didn't understand it. Spend a couple of years and study the years around leading up to and during and then after that war they call the Civil War, which was not a civil war. And I don't mean that in the case that no war is civil. I mean it was not a civil war. It's been hammered that way, and it's been presented that way to make it look like it's something different than it actually was. The South had no interest in the North. They didn't want to take over the North. They didn't want to take over the government. They simply wanted to be left alone. What happened to the South after the war between the states was horrible. It'll make you sick if you really want to look into it. And we can go deep into that. Maybe I will sometime. But go into it yourself. There's no reason for you to believe what some guy on a YouTube video says, and there's no reason for you to argue about it if you don't know what you're talking about. So learn about it. Really learn about it so that you can form an opinion of your own if you don't have an informed opinion now. After that, we come through the we essentially have a split country. It's not a nation. It's not unified at all. We go through the Spanish-American War. Well, if you want to look at what started that, look at what started that. I'm not gonna. Don't take my word for it. I'm not even gonna say. When World War I came along, everybody likes to look back on these wars and say, yeah, but we were united when the important things happened. World War I and World War II and 9/11 and all that. Really? Most Americans wanted no part of World War I. It was a European war they didn't want to be in. Okay, my grandfather fought in it. There was no reason for a young American to be over there fighting that war. Look into that one. World War II comes around, right? Because it was essentially a result of the Treaty of Versailles, a foreseeable result. World War II comes along. And people have this idea that there was this united stance against the Axis powers, against Nazi Germany and Italy and all this. Wasn't all the case. There was a great deal of support in the United States for Germany. Okay, big surprise to a lot of people when they learn that. Go study it yourself if you want to know why. Okay, we get through there, and we have a few peaceful years in the 50s, if you don't count Korea, of which there was very great division in the feeling here in the United States. But again, one section of our country was able to, get their way over another bunch, and so we went over there, and oh wait, we're still over there, aren't we? Yeah, we are. Vietnam. Okay, was there a unified belief on the part of the American people that we should be sending our guys over to Vietnam? Well, study it yourself and read about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and find out for yourself what you think. Okay. Even after we bring it through here, if we bring it through 9/11, people like to think that because we have memorials that everybody felt the same way. Not at all. There was a great division in the way that even Americans, and I'm talking about patriotic Americans. I'm not talking about the ones who were happy it happened. I'm talking about Americans. Not all Americans felt the same about that, and not all Americans felt that we should be sending people over to the Middle East. Okay, so what has happened is that a country called the United States of America became an empire without ever having been a nation. Remember what I said about what makes a nation. It's a homogeneous group of people with a common heritage, language, history, religion, very often. But we became an empire, never having been a nation. Now that brings us back to Glubb's work on the fate of empires. And I want to read to you. I found my old stack. A writer has stacks of everything all over the place, and it took me a while to find it. But I found my old copy of Fate of Empires, and so instead of trying to remember it, because it's been a while since I read it, and I misquoted a little bit the other day when I said talked about the decline and the collapse. He does not characterize it that way. He characterizes it as the decadence. So I brought the copy out here so that I'd get it right for you. The age of decadence is the final where the empire starts to go down. And it is characterized by defensiveness, pessimism, materialism, frivolity, an influx of immigrants, the welfare state, and a weakening of religion. Decadence is due, he says, to too long a period of wealth and power, selfishness, love of money, and the loss of a sense of duty. Well, I don't argue that that's what we've experienced here. You can have your own opinion. You can look at it. But if you look what is happening to our country, what has been happening to our country, we have millions of people on welfare now. We have millions of children being born and raised without fathers. Nationally, the birth rate out of wedlock is 30%. In the black community, it's 75%. How can children being born into that have any chance to access the opportunities of a society like ours? They can't. Now, people say that you can't, that morality is, we shouldn't judge morality. We judged morality for centuries, and now we don't, and we're seeing the effects of it. Okay, millions of people think that half our country, I guess, thinks that health insurance should be a right. Well, if it is, then why not food? Why not housing? Well, millions of people live in government housing. And this is not a racial issue for anybody who thinks it is. There are more whites on welfare and in public housing than other groups. So this is not a racial issue at all. Although some people try to make it seem like that. We've seen a decline in the quality of our life. We've seen an increase in not necessarily violent crimes that make the news, but a decline of social expectations. When I was younger, when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s, pretty much everybody, regardless of religion, race, political party, background, whatever. Pretty much everybody felt the same about the major issues. You wouldn't find anybody who thought that it was okay to steal. You wouldn't find anyone who thought it was okay to cheat on a test. And now we have a majority of college students, and when they answer questionnaires, they think it's fine to cheat on a test because the result is more important than honor. That's what's happened to our country. And so we have become an empire in the decadent segment as he describes it. And that's why I think that our country can collapse. Now, will it all go away? No. Interestingly enough, he describes the British Empire as having ended in, I think it was somewhere around in the 50s, the 1950s. Well, we know that Great Britain is still alive as a country, but look what it is. It's not what it used to be. And look what's happening over there. If you read the news, you would not want to live over there, and people that I know who do tell me that. And people have said that we're just about 50 years behind them. Well, I can agree with that. We're in the bread and circuses era of this. Too many people aren't paying attention because they're watching ball games and reality shows. Okay? And they're fat and happy, and they have everything that they want. And they're just too busy, or the news is too depressing, or they just can't be bothered with it, or whatever. This is why I believe the country will go into a collapse. Now, the government, or at least the empire, okay, let me say that, the American empire, people don't like to talk about that, but come on, look at every place we are in the world, right? Everywhere we go, we never come back. Isn't that the truth? Okay, so the empire will collapse. The country will keep going because the might of the American government will keep it going for a while. But we have $23 trillion deficit this year, or so far. We have a $23 trillion deficit, $160 trillion or north in unfunded liabilities. There's no way to pay this back. When you're running a deficit every year, you cannot pay back what you owe long term, so it's not going to be paid back. I don't care how good the economy is. So there will be a collapse of some sort. The country will still be here. The question is, what kind of a country will it be? It won't be the America that I remembered, or that you remembered if you're old enough. And I don't know how much worse it could get than this, but I'm sure it can get a lot worse, and I hate to think about that. So, just kind of to wrap this up, this was my explanation of why I think, yes, we can collapse. What we collapse into is the question. And that's actually the subject of some more books that I have coming out. But I would suggest think about that. And if you have anybody, I've never said this before on any of my videos, but if you have anybody that is interested in this, send them this video. See what they think about it. And if there's any reason to prepare. Okay, so my guru said that I talked too long, so his camera ran out and we had to start another one, and I told him to splice this on the end. So what I was saying was simply this. If there's any reason to prepare, this would be it. Other than an EMP CME, this is what you want to prepare for, and that is the collapse. What shape it's going to take is anybody's guess, but how you prepare for it is easy. Prepare for everything. Prepare for complete self-reliance. I remember I lived through the riots in Kansas City in 1968. I saw what happens when a society blows up, and if you imagine that happening, more than one place, it's a mess, and you don't want to be left unready. So prepare, get ready. Realize that If it can happen, it will happen, and it will. So on that happy note, I'm going to get back and finishing up this third book, and I'll leave you with our reminder to prepare well today so that you can live well tomorrow. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.